informational meeting. I'm going to let Kathy Robertson, who is the president of the Fayette Community Development Corporation. I got it right that time, didn't I? And they're initiating this meeting. It's an informational meeting, so I'm going to let Kathy come forward and she'll do some introductions and you just take charge.
All right, I like to do that, at least at home. Okay, so as Mayor Nelson said, I am chairman of the Fayette Community Development Corporation, and this is a group of local volunteers who have been focusing our efforts on promoting projects in Fayette that lead to economic development and enhance quality of life for our residents. Our main project for the past 3 years has been the hopeful restoration of the historic Fayette Hotel, located on the second story above Standard Furniture, going west to the corner above Chick Frills. Very soon we'll have exciting things to share with you on that project, and I want to give Tony Robertson credit for that, who has worked so diligently as chairman, but she's running late because she went to my house to get some papers that I forgot to bring. We are in support of Fayette one day soon becoming a Main Street, Alabama community. It's what we'd like to see happen. And most recently, we've become involved in promoting this recreational trail project that would convert the old railroad bed from the depot to Highway 106 as a multi-use, handicap-accessible walking and biking trail. Many questions arise when we begin to plan a project like this, and most of the concerns and questions tend to come from adjoining property owners, of course. My family and I are one of them, and while I currently don't live on the railroad, I wish I did. We raised our family in our early years on 3rd Street Northwest, adjacent to the railway, and we found a lot of comfort in the sound of the train whistling through at 4 a.m. in the morning. I have to say that if the opportunity had come up while we lived there, I would be very much in favor of this project for many reasons. The biggest one being able to walk, ride a bike, or push a stroller to downtown, which is impossible now with the traffic and lack of sidewalks on Columbus Street. Tonight, we hope to present information and answer questions that you may have either as an adjoining property owner or as an interested and concerned citizen. We encourage you to ask questions, but ask that you reserve your comments of support and opposition to be expressed at the public hearing, which will take place on Thursday night in this room. The meeting will begin at 5 with a hearing regarding the expansion of the historic district, and then we'll move to the trail project. Now, in order to provide you with up-to-date information and share a wealth of knowledge, we've invited someone who at this particular time is the expert in the arena, Brian Rushing. Brian has held the position of Director of Economic Development Initiatives at the University of Alabama Center for Economic Development since July of 2015. He came to the center with an educational and professional background in the natural sciences, environmental conservation planning and management, recreation development, business management, project management, real estate acquisitions, partnership building, and fundraising. He focuses much of his work on facilitating outdoor recreation planning and development initiatives with local governments, state and federal agencies, and private partners, providing both project leadership and technical assistance to advance these efforts. Through these efforts, Brian is helping Alabama communities take better advantage of the growing recreation and nature-based tourism markets while improving quality of life for our citizens. All that's on the website, verbatim. A native of Alabama, Brian holds his BS from the University of the South in Natural Resources, an MS from LSU in Environmental Planning and Management, and an MBA from the University of Alabama. We welcome Brian. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, and good evening, everybody. It's always great to be back in Fayette. And I tell you what, I've really been amazed at the great things that Fayette has done and is in the process of doing. Y'all are a well-established, long-standing Alabama community of excellence, and it's obvious that you've taken that role very seriously in moving forward with doing some really fantastic things to support economic development in your town. And I've got to say that you have the most amazing aquatic recreation center I've seen in any municipality anywhere. And it's the envy, I think, of a lot of towns. And the downtown revitalization really is spectacular, and the beautification is wonderful too. I echo the comments earlier that Fayette downtown is one of the most beautiful downtowns in Alabama. But as Kathy has mentioned, we can make it even better. And so the rail trail project really is a fantastic opportunity. Kathy asked me to come and really just sort of speak sort of in general about rail trail projects, just to kind of orient y'all to sort of what the trends are with rail trail projects throughout the country and in Alabama, the benefits of rail trails, and then some of the common concerns that are common questions that typically arise. And so we can maybe go through and address some of those, and certainly can take questions afterwards. So looking at trends of rail trails, this is really a national trend that is only growing in the rate of trails coming online. I think at this point we have about 5 new rail trails that come online each week in the United States. But communities throughout the Southeast and across the country are literally investing billions of dollars in redeveloping these rail corridors typically for multi-use trails. Right now, as of today, and this number changed from 1,945 yesterday to 1,947 today, so apparently there were ribbon cuttings on 2 rail trails in the intervening time. But currently there are 1,947 rail trails throughout the U.S. There are 777 that are in progress. Looking more closely at the Southeast, there are 30 active trails in Tennessee, 26 in Georgia, 13 in Mississippi, and in our state we have 17 active rail trails from as far north as Elkmont to as far south as Baldwin County. And we have 8 projects, not counting this one, in sort of in progress right now. So this is a big movement towards taking this infrastructure and really turning it into an asset that benefits communities. Oftentimes, these projects are part of larger efforts to revitalize communities and improve off-street connections within and between cities and towns, and to support active living. As is being looked at in Fayette, this rail trail potentially, is a great complement to the efforts that have been underway for some time to revitalize downtown and make downtown much more attractive, not only for its citizens but for visitors. And so this is the pattern that we see throughout the country. Greenville, South Carolina, there on the right, fantastic case study of downtown revitalization. And they don't have a rail trail per se, but they do have a river, the Reedy River, and a fantastic greenway that's kind of an anchor at one end of their downtown. 10 years ago, I've been told there was no reason to be in downtown Greenville on a Saturday morning. And now you basically have to fight your way down the sidewalk. There's so many people. It's really great. So looking specifically at rail trails come in many forms. There's a whole spectrum of rail trails. They can go from the minimally developed rail trail to the intensively developed rail trail, depending upon the intended use and the available resources. Here I've got pictured on the left the Richard Martin Trail in Elkmont, Alabama, which is up near Athens, which is a 13.5 mile soft surface crushed gravel rail trail that is suitable for mountain bikes, for walkers, joggers. It is smooth enough for strollers and for wheelchairs, but not really great for road bikes. But they happen to attract a lot of equestrians on this trail, so it's a popular horseback riding trail. On the right is probably the most extreme at the other end of the spectrum of highly developed trails. This is the High Line in New York City, which I think was over $1 billion project, but every square inch of this old rail corridor that's an elevated corridor that runs right through Manhattan has been designed with landscaping and benches and sort of really high design. So that's kind of the extreme end. Most of the projects fall somewhere in the middle, typically a bit more towards the less developed end of the spectrum. But most rail trails are multi-use. Most rail trails, I would venture to say, are in fact paved asphalt trails, although there are various combinations of asphalt and gravel that you can use. So, moving on to benefits. Reason why communities are pursuing these projects at an alarming rate is because the benefits are really sort of across the board. Rail trail projects really are kind of, for lack of a better euphemism, you kill many birds with one stone. You have positive impacts with the economy, with health, with quality of life, and the environment. I'm going to go into economic benefits a bit more in detail because while health, quality of life, and environment are important and are valuable, for most communities it's really a bottom line issue. And so the economic impact is really what these communities are looking at. But within economic impact, basically what you're doing is creating opportunity to attract and retain business, and you're also helping to increase nearby property values. Those are two big pluses with respect to economic impact. With health, creating rail trails in your community and publicly accessible places for people to safely recreate essentially makes opportunities for physical activity more accessible to people. When you do that, you end up helping to reduce obesity and obesity-related disease, and that reduces healthcare costs. The Journal for Preventive Medicine about 5 years ago came out with a couple of studies that actually found that if you have a trail that's a safe sort of off-street place for people to walk and bike, it's in a community and it's easy to access and people know about it. The average citizen is 50% more likely to get regular exercise than they would otherwise. And even if you're not necessarily getting out there and losing a lot of weight on the trail, just simply having the opportunity to get out and walk, or if you can jog or bike, really has tremendous benefits in addressing obesity-related disease as well. So health is hugely important, and we've got an issue certainly with that in our country and most certainly in Alabama. Quality of life, communities are more attractive and enjoyable for people to live in, people of all ages. People are looking for places where you can walk and bike now, and that ranges from the retired population to young professionals, and so it's really kind of across the board, but it's something that's really being demanded now in most communities. Off-road trails are safer for walkers, runners, cyclists, wheelchairs, and strollers, as I alluded to. And with respect to the environment, you create an alternative to getting in your car. So you save a little bit on those emissions and gives you an opportunity to go where you want to go without having to turn the key in your ignition. So looking a little more in detail at economic benefits. There's a whole suite of economic benefits that come along with rail trails. Increase in consumer spending, essentially you generate opportunities for business, particularly service sector, people that are coming through your community, places to eat, places to get food and beverage are big things associated with rail trails. Accommodations as well, particularly if you've got a longer rail trail. Can be a big draw for recreational tourism, and so you can get an uptick in your overnight stays. So recreational tourism, if you've got a trail that you're promoting, as another thing to do in your community, and that's part of your package that you're reaching out to potential tourists. That's just yet another draw, yet another thing to do, yet another reason for someone to spend time in your community. So that's another great source of revenue, basically, and economic impact. Special events, running races, cycling races. These are huge in a lot of communities that have rail trails. And at 2.5 miles, you could certainly have your 5K race if you wanted to on a rail trail and have it be completely off street, although it is really great that Aldott helps out with the light signs. But that could be another option potentially for you. But special events are big sort of slugs of economic impact that happen associated with rail trails. Increased property values, it's pretty consistent and a well-known fact in markets all across the country, not only in Alabama but elsewhere. In general, you have a positive effect on adjacent property values because trails are being desired, essentially, in the marketplace. I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a sec. Attracting and retaining business, having trails in your community as a quality of life feature and asset is another selling point when you're trying to recruit businesses to locate in your community. And I'll talk about that in just a second, a little bit more too. And so all of that equates to jobs. And so essentially communities that have these trails tend to have a more vibrant economy than comparable communities that do not. Looking real quick at one case study here locally in Alabama is the Chief Ladiga Trail. Chief Ladiga Trail runs from the town of Weaver, Alabama, just about 6 miles north of Anniston, through the cities of Jacksonville and Piedmont, and sort of hooks over to the east, goes across the state line, and then becomes the Silver Comet Trail in Georgia, and it continues on into Smyrna, Georgia, just in the suburbs, really, of Atlanta, kind of near Marietta. So it runs altogether, I think, 60 or 70 miles. 32.5 miles are in Alabama, and that's the section that we call the Chief Ladiga Trail. It's a bicycle pedestrian trail. It's multi-use. It's a 12-foot wide paved asphalt trail. It was built over the course of about 10 years. They finished the trail about 5 or 6 years ago. So sort of 2000 to 2010 was the time period when that trail was built. In their particular case, they built the trail for an average of $70,000 per mile. So total price tag essentially was about $2 million to build that trail. And it's a relatively minimal trail. It doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles right now, although the communities along it are working on adding those on as they go. Trailheads, restroom facilities, that sort of thing. But they just pretty much started with the trail. Between the cities of Jacksonville and Piedmont, it costs about $50,000 a year to operate. They do that with in-house staff, but the basic cost to them between salaries and equipment and materials is about $50,000. And again, that's for a 32.5 mile paved rail trail. Jacksonville State study done last year looking at the economic impact of the trail annually found, and this is a conservative estimate, that it has a $1.5 million annual economic impact. So this trail essentially pays for itself every year and a quarter, more or less. So granted, this is a long rail trail. Granted, it's part of the Silver Comet Trail, it's conjoined with the Silver Comet Trail. Granted, you have big markets between Birmingham and Atlanta. It is a destination, but it's an example to these little towns of Jacksonville and Piedmont of what a rail trail has done in their community. And you can see certainly, while that's a great example of a high impact, large trail, even smaller trails have material economic impact that is worth a relatively modest investment. Looking at increased property values, in certain markets, you can have a premium of both residential and commercial properties of as much as 20% on the fair market. And in 2002, there was a home buyer survey that was conducted by the National Association of Home Realtors and the Association of Home Builders that found that trails ranked second only to access to highways and roads as a criteria for making a decision to buy a home. So no longer is it golf courses, no longer Is it, having tennis courts or, those things that you might associate with a gated development? It's, where am I in relation to the trail? And so that's pretty significant, and I would predict, I haven't seen a more recent survey than 2002, but I would predict that trend has grown. So attracting business, a great example of a community that has made trails in general and outdoor recreation and parks and green space a major part of their downtown revitalization is Chattanooga. And if any of y'all have not been to Chattanooga in the last 15 years, if you're ever heading up I-20, I-59, please stop off in Chattanooga and just stay a while, eat lunch, whatever. That city is really amazing. And you may recall in 2010, Volkswagen Huntsville was one of the cities that Volkswagen was considering going to, but they ended up going to Chattanooga. And in part, Volkswagen officials pointed to the city's effort to protect natural amenities, create a healthier city, and improve quality of life as one of the drivers of their decision to select Chattanooga. And so, so their efforts at park and green space and trail development were a major component of that quality of life thing that is so important, certainly to Germans, but really to companies all across the country. And so that generated $1 billion of investment, 2,000 new jobs for the city of Chattanooga. So moving on to common questions. These are questions that typically come about when communities are considering rail trail projects. And I'll just run through them real quick and do the Q&A. And there's oftentimes this question about adjacent property values. What happens with adjacent property values if a rail trail comes in? Will the values go down? And I am actively looking for a study that says that property values do go down. If any of y'all stumble upon any, please let me know. All of the studies that I have seen show a positive, either a neutral or a positive impact on property fair market value, both in urban, suburban, exurban, rural areas. It's sort of across the board. In rural areas, particularly with adjacent undeveloped property, you either have a neutral effect or just a slightly positive effect, but no study has found that I'm aware of a negative effect on property values. When you get into residential areas and even commercial areas, you have a marked positive impact on property values, as much as 20%. This is off of Zillow on the right. I just thought, I'm gonna go on Zillow and just type in Silver Comet Trail and see what comes up. And sure enough, there are, in Georgia, a boatload of listings out there that tout the fact that they are close to and even right on the Silver Comet Trail. This fairly nice house in the Parkland Run subdivision of Smyrna they say, has a full basement that walks out onto a private backyard accessible to the Silver Comet Trail. And that's the house right there. And you can't really tell, but this break in the trees is the Silver Comet Trail. And so these people literally have an opportunity to walk out of their back door onto the Silver Comet Trail. And so that's a selling point. And obviously if the public wasn't, if the public didn't demand and was not interested in seeing these opportunities to directly tie into a trail from their house, they wouldn't tout this as a marketable aspect of the property. And I zoom back out and just to look at all of the properties in Georgia, both urban and rural, that are on the Chief Ladiga Trail that are being marketed as this house is close to the Chief Ladiga Trail. And you see this, if you haven't, it doesn't really work if you just type in rail trail, but if you know the name of a trail and you type in properties near such and such a trail, they'll come up. And you'll see that realtors are marketing these houses in part. They're marketing the fact that, or highlighting the fact that they're close to these amenities. Can adjacent landowners retain or obtain legal access across a trail? Yes. Existing easements, when a rail trail when a rail corridor is acquired and subsequently developed into a trail, those easements have to be honored legally. And certainly needed easements of adjacent landowners can be granted in the future. I don't think it's a goal of any municipality or county to ever try to keep someone from accessing their property, and I know that that's not the case in Fayette. And so if you have adjacent landowners that don't necessarily have access to their property, but they need access across the trail, that can be certainly worked out. If you've got a situation where, say, you've got someone who needs to, wants to go in and harvest trees off of their property, that can be done through a temporary easement if they just need that, or it could be done through a permanent easement, but may include a provision that once the logging operation is over and done with, that if there are any repairs that need to be made to the trail, that those are made. In the case of a more permanent access, you may have a driveway that goes across, or that a landowner wants to build across the trail. And in that case, there's infrastructure you can put in place to ensure that the public that's using the trail will be safe as they approach that drive and they know to stop. The trail users always yield to oncoming traffic, be it a public road or be it a driveway. And so the rail trail on the right shows a really good example of signage and bollarding there that announces that the trail users are coming up to a driveway and to be careful. The photo on the left is a bit more sparsely appointed approach to a private driveway, but the stanchion in the middle with the reflector on it announces the fact that you're coming up to a driveway. So there are different ways of handling that. That's something that's really determined and developed in the design process of the trail. But there are multiple ways of ensuring that you can have access across the rail corridor, and you can keep the people on the rail corridor safe, and also prevent people from, in their car turning onto the rail corridor with the physical barriers there. And the risk of trespass or dumping increased on adjacent properties. Oftentimes with abandoned rail corridors, you have what essentially is an abandoned road that people are currently using to trespass on properties and dump oftentimes. And typically what we see in these cases is that when you convert that, what is essentially an abandoned road, into an actual developed corridor, those problems tend to disappear. And that's due really to two factors. One is that you've got an increased presence of people on the trail, and these are folks who have cell phones, and if they see something wrong, they're going to immediately call 911 or the dispatch or whatever, and say we've got a problem out on the trail. And then the other reason is, whereas you had just an open dirt road before, you do have barriers that keep people from driving onto the rail trail. And so it's much harder for someone to certainly drive up and dump onto the rail corridor. If there are concerns that nearby homeowners have, or landowners, don't necessarily have to be homeowners, but just landowners, if they're concerned about trespass, that can often be addressed by, as we mentioned earlier, fencing, no signage, no trespassing signage, and in some cases, landscaping can help out with that too. But the photo on the left shows a residential development that backs up to a rail trail. That's in Maryland, and in their particular case, they just happen to have a split rail fence. That's more of a visual barrier, but works for that community. And then on the right, that shows actually the bollard sort of system that's similar to the previous photo we looked at on the last slide. That just shows, at least on the Chief Ladiga Trail over in Piedmont, how they prevent cars from getting up onto the corridor. Will the trail create an opportunity for crime? Again, this is one thing that is an idea that is entirely unsupported by the data. There's certainly, crime happens everywhere. Crime happens on the street. And in fact, most streets are more dangerous than most rail trails. But there is no pattern of increased crime or a relocation of crime to rail trails after rail trails have been built. Again, going back to the fact that you've got legitimate users who are out on the trail, eyes on the street, if you will, a de facto sort of neighborhood watch. Obviously, safety is the most important concern on a trail, and so the thought around the design and operation of the trail has to center on safety before anything else. And so, so most rail trails are daylight use only. In some places they may have nighttime use, but you would have lighting associated with that, and there might be nighttime use along a certain segment of the trail. But just like anywhere, just like walking down the sidewalk, people have to use their common sense too about being on a trail. But there is no data that supports any increased level of crime on rail trails as opposed to anywhere else. And there haven't been any. I have talked to most of the mayors in Alabama who have rail trails coming through their community, and that's one of the things I asked them. What are your problems with your trail? Do you have trespass? Do you have dumping? Do you have increased crime? And so far I can't find anyone who can tell me, yes, we've had an issue. There's always the one-off incident that happens, but that's the one-off incident that's going to just happen pretty much anywhere, but there is not a consistent pattern at all that I've been able to find. So again, if you find an example, please bring it to me. I want to know about it. What are the costs to build and operate a rail trail? And this sounds like a cop-out answer, but it's really not, but it really just depends. It depends on, obviously, on how long it is. It depends on what you want to do with the trail, how built out you want it to be, what kind of amenities you want it to have, and how you want to maintain it. But I like to sort of use the Chief Ladiga example as kind of a good example in Alabama of how to efficiently build a rail trail. Granted, those prices, the cost was incurred between 2000 and 2010, so it's a little bit dated. But generally speaking, when I go into a community and work with them on scoping out a project, I generally use the $100,000 per mile number for a paved asphalt, 12-foot wide pathway. But obviously, you know, that's dependent upon material costs, which, you know, certainly have gone up over the last few years. But in all cases, cities can reduce the costs associated with developing and maintaining trails by entering into partnerships with businesses, foundations, philanthropic individuals, and friends groups. There are a lot of communities that that have great friends of certain trails that will come out on certain days and have cleanups and repairs and do things to improve and beautify the trail. And so friends groups are hugely important and a valuable partner for a lot of communities. And then the federal funding resources that Kathy mentioned, the Recreation Trails Program provides funding for trail acquisition, trail development, and trail maintenance. And so you can continually come back to that funding source for help. The Transportation Alternatives Program also, which is administered through ADECA, is a much larger funding source. Grants for trails through TAP, as we call it, can range up to $500,000, and so it's not insignificant funding that can be used to build and maintain trails. I'm not sure TAP actually can be used to maintain. It can be used to build. I know RTP can be used to maintain. But anyway, there in all cases there's a 20% local match. Both programs are reimbursement programs that require the local project sponsor to front the cost, but then they submit for reimbursement up to 80% of each receipt, essentially, or each canceled check. But that's basically how you can leverage resources to both build and maintain trails, and communities are doing it all throughout the country. Just to give you a quick look at some nearby trails, if you happen to be in the area, I call these nearby, but there's only one that's truly nearby, and that's the Horse Creek Trail that runs from Dora almost to downtown Summerton. But there's also the Tanglefoot Trail over New Albany, Mississippi, that's just west of Tupelo. That's a 43-mile long rail trail. It's kind of like their Chief Ladiga. They've got a couple of long rail trails, in fact, in Mississippi. Also, they have the Longleaf Trace down in the Hattiesburg area. Then I mentioned the Richard Martin Trail up in Elkmont, Alabama. Really wonderful trail if you're ever heading up I-65 and have an hour to kill, turn left and drive 5 miles to Elkmont. Tiny downtown that is just popping. There's all kinds of activity happening there. They have this rail trail. They have a canoe trail on the Elk River. pulling in a lot of people to spend Saturdays to recreate there. But the Horse Creek Trail in Dora and Summerton is what I would consider to be probably the closest comparable to what you might be doing here in Fayette. It's a 2.5 mile rail trail, paved, 12 feet wide, and is very nice and well maintained and well kept and well used. The day I was there, I was just driving through on a Thursday afternoon, and there were 8 cars or 6 cars in the parking lot. And so, if y'all haven't made a trip over there yet, I definitely encourage you to do so and take a look at it and talk to the good folks in Dora and Summerton. But for more information about rail trail projects, just in general, you can pretty much find the answer to any question you have at americantrails.org, railtrails.org, and then also just want to highlight alabamarecreationtrails.org. We're currently building out the sort of technical information side of this website, but it's a website that the University of Alabama Center for Economic Development has released in cooperation with the Alabama Trails Commission to provide kind of a one-stop shop for people to find information about trails. And you can search for trails based upon use type, so it's all different kinds of recreational trails, ranging from cycling to hiking to horseback riding to ATV and OHV to paddling. And so, and you can also, it's a great way to plug people into trails that are nearby that they can use to recreate, and then also they can find locally owned accommodations and outfitters in the area that have businesses that they can patronize. So, so that's, but we are building out the technical resources side of that. And here in the next couple of months, we should have that pretty well finalized. We just released a new version of that yesterday, and so it's a good resource. And so have fun. This is really, as far as I'm concerned, kind of what it's all about. It's these trails create an amenity in a community that is a fun feature and something that people can enjoy. It's a thing that people can use to commute to work if they want to, but it's for the most part a place where people can engage in active living and get out and ride their bikes, walk, jog, stroll, that sort of thing. And communities all across the country are loving these things, and so I think you've got a fantastic opportunity to really enhance the great things y'all are doing here in Fayette. And so, so I hope this fills in some gaps for you. I'm happy to take any questions that anybody
I'm sure
may
there's
have.
questions. Go ahead.
What is the length from the depot to 106?
It's right at about 2.5 miles.
It is right at 2.5.
Yeah. So it's almost exactly the same length as the
Part
Dora
of
Summit.
that goes in the other direction, but
What do you
with
mean?
this project,
Other direction.
Past the depot, going towards the city.
toward the river.
Oh,
The
But
property
there's
they
not
offered
a-
was from 6th Avenue, which is down at Arvin, over to Taylor Road. That's about 2.5 miles.
that's good. You go across town that way. What about, and you've been lucky that no property owners adjacent went to Norfolk Southern and buy up their part of the,
They're trying.
yeah, that's a biggie, get that secured. So you're not in competition with private owners.
The railroad is working with the city. They've entertained an offer and they're waiting for us to make a counteroffer. And
Yeah, so
they've
it's
been
clear
contacted
right
by
now.
individuals and they've told them until the city comes forward and says we're no longer interested, they're not going to entertain other offers.
That's a big relief.
Kent?
Unfortunately, I leave for work tomorrow, so I won't have a chance to be here on Thursday for the opposition or support. So please forgive me if I
That's
don't
fine.
follow
That's
the
fine.
rules.
No, you're fine.
First, let me ask you a couple questions. In Fayette, and I know, like you said earlier, we're not even really to the planning stages, but we do have an intended use in mind. What would the intended use for the trail here in Fayette be? Would it be a 12-foot wide paved hiking and bike path, or would it be something kind of on the soft gravel or whatever end of that? Like what?
I think definitely hiking and biking.
Yeah, what we're trying to target is the multi-use, non-motorized trail, which would be hiking and biking. And so it would not allow any all-terrain vehicles or motorcycles or anything like that, or
No horses?
no, we had not considered equestrian, but we would like to put together a steering committee of people who are interested and have the community's input.
And I'll just comment on that. You know, typically what is done is, and it's typically done once the quarter is secured, because you don't really put a lot of resources into planning real heavily until, you know, you have property. But typically early on in the planning process, and it's optional whether or not you want to really do a master plan. Chief Ladiga Trail was not built with a master plan. They just pretty much, cities of Jacksonville and Piedmont knew what they wanted to build. Knew it was going to be a simple trail and nothing terribly fancy. But I would definitely, you know, encourage you all to have, you know, a public input opportunity to find out what the community is interested in seeing on the trail as far as uses are concerned, as far as amenities are concerned. You know, even if it's not something that could be accommodated within an initial budget to put the trail out or to develop the trail initially, you know, there may be some additional uses or amenities that could be added further down the line. It would just be good to account for those. So having a public input process is a really important way to do that. On the equestrian side, the Richard Martin Trail is really kind of a rare exception of cohabitating horses and cyclists and walkers, but they manage it just fine, and it's a really popular trail. The longest race in Mississippi is a 12-foot wide paved asphalt trail that runs 42 miles, and in their case, they actually elected to, they have a strong equestrian community in South Central Mississippi, and they wanted to have a place to ride. And so along a 25-mile segment of that trail, they have a parallel soft surface equestrian trail that they can use. 2.5 miles is not very long to ride a horse, so there's probably not, I would imagine there wouldn't be much of a demand for horseback riding. There are probably many other better places to ride in the area.
Fair enough. My second question, since we were talking about horses, if it is used to beautify the community, of course, I mean, we all know what horses do when they go for a walk. Would that be something that the city would put in the planning stages of allocating someone to clean that or to clean the trail, especially running right through my neighborhood? Because, I mean,
Oftentimes, the way that you handle that is you require, in communities where they decide that horseback riding would be permitted, it oftentimes will require a catch bag to keep that problem down.
fair enough.
If that's what you're referring to.
I didn't actually know that existed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fair enough. And my other question is, you spoke with mayors of the cities that the Rails to Trails has been through. Have any of them given you the indication that they increased police patrols down the corridors? And have some of them said that while not necessarily a crime, they have found suspicious individuals or suspicious activity on the trails after hours, before hours, that kind of thing? Has there been any indication of that?
Again, not a pattern of any increased, suspicious activity of any kind. And most of these communities don't do an active patrol up and down the trail. They certainly have patrols that will intersect the trail at street crossings, just on their, during the due course of the daily rounds of police patrols. But of the rail trails that are in Alabama, I have not found any that have, any acute sort of stepped up patrol of those facilities, any more so than any other park facility in the city.
All right, thank you.
Sir, let me expound on that just a little bit, your last question. I saw the paved trails that have the vehicle barriers, the steel post in the road. Our police officers would have a need to get on the trail in an emergency situation responding to a call, is there some provisions where a police car can get on that trail if it need be?
Most certainly. That's a really important point, and I should have mentioned it, and I apologize that I didn't. In every case that I have seen, these bollards are removable for emergency purposes. In some cities, you have a gate that's just across the rail corridor that again provides a barrier between the trail and a cross street or a driveway. And in those cases, the gates can be opened for emergency vehicles. But yes, most certainly, you want to have emergency vehicles. The trail has got to be accommodate an emergency vehicle to be able to drive down there in all cases. So these are removable bollards that are locking.
And what would keep anybody who had a motorbike or something, or motorized two-wheeler, whatever, what would keep them from removing them and using, and just going right on in?
And they actually could certainly go through the bollards. They wouldn't necessarily have to remove the bollards if they're on a motorcycle. And even on a four-wheeler, I mean, in this case, certainly on the Horse Creek Trail, you've got, you know, a lot of open area around where they could certainly come across. And it falls back again to citizens. If they see something happening, calling in and the police coming out and responding and busting the individual. And basically if the word gets out that this trail is being cared for, watched after, and people aren't going to tolerate that kind of activity, and you got it signed as such, that kind of activity, it may happen every now and then, maybe a one-off incident, but typically, and again, this is based upon everything that I have seen, you don't have a pattern of increased activity. I asked Mayor Johnny Smith in Jacksonville about the Chief Ladaga Trail, about, you know, have they ever had any issues with you know, ATVs on the trail or that kind of activity, and he said that in his 8 years of being at Jacksonville as mayor, he has not seen that activity happen. He's not aware of it ever happening on the Chief Ladaga Trail.
See, we already have that happening on the railroad bed now.
Yeah.
There are four-wheelers and motorcycles that are quite noisy.
And so that goes back to this idea that you've got essentially sort of an unregulated, abandoned dirt road right there, which, I mean, when I was 10 years old, I was on a three-wheeler, and I was out there doing the very same thing, so I'm sort of guilty. But when you establish the trail and you establish legitimate use of it, you have the infrastructure, the signage in place, that activity tends to go elsewhere.
But if everybody read and obeyed signs, we would not need a state trooper in the state of Alabama to get out ever a part of.
That's true, and signs are not the panacea. Signs are not the solution. Signs
They don't
just
obey them.
give notice, and so it really is incumbent, certainly upon the police to respond when there is a problem, so that people know that that kind of activity is not being tolerated.
And when we get grant money, it's required to get an unmotorized trail, so we can't allow motorized traffic on there, is that correct?
Not. That's right. It can't be allowed as a non-motorized
So
trail.
on the city to make sure it's not routinely used for motorized traffic, right?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's not. It's more that the city does not condone it. I mean, obviously, if someone does trespass and use it to ride their ATV on, that's not condoned, and so that doesn't, you know, that doesn't earn points against you or anything like that. But again, I'm giving case study examples of, you know, around the state of Alabama and elsewhere across the country, and it does take citizens caring about it. It does take law enforcement caring about it. But when you set the bar where it needs to be, there typically is not an issue or a pattern of issues in the community.
Is all the rail now, is it in the city limits, or is it just, is a part of it gonna be in the county?
Part of it is in the county.
Part of it will be in police jurisdiction.
All of it? Will all of it be in police? Will it? Okay. So the city will be responsible for that? Okay.
It's not far, but it's from, like the end of their property to the end of my property that's out of the city.
So it'll be a little bit in the county? So the
Yeah, it's
county
not
has
much.
some.
Well, all of it would be the police jurisdiction, so we can respond.
Well, we don't get many
Police jurisdiction goes all
city
the way out.
cops out on our road, but we do.
Those goes all out to Tobin, right? but you just don't take
All
it.
of the trails that you go through residential areas.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
Do all of the trails that you talked about go through residential areas?
Let's see. Yes, all the, so the trails nearby in Alabama that I talked about, and Chief Ladiga is off the screen here. But Tanglefoot, Richard Martin, Horse Creek Trail, as well as Chief Ladiga, along some section back up to residential properties, yes.
Now, I know, like I said earlier, I know we're not in the planning stages yet, but living on 2nd Street Northwest and the emergency vehicles that we brought up a minute ago, would the only access point for emergency vehicles be at the ends of the trail, or would you guys come on to 3rd Street Northwest and put an access point there?
That would be really a planning and design question that would have to be answered, I think. I mean, I would imagine, obviously, you know, it's a good thing that the trail, I mean, in some sense, that the trail really, you know, is 2.5 miles long because it is very accessible from both ends.
Right.
But, you know, having other access along the way where it's feasible, where you've got, you know, landowner help, where you have you know, an intersecting public road right of way, we would need to look at that. Because again, when it comes to planning, safety is the first concern. And so I imagine wherever accesses are feasible, you would probably want to have them for emergency purposes. And again, if you've got, I don't think we have any other actual road crossings once you get past, is it Columbus?
Martin Luther.
Martin Luther, okay. Until you get to
And
106.
at the depot. Yeah, the depot,
Yeah.
Martin Luther, and then 106.
So very quickly, the trail sort of goes out into rural sort of countryside.
But
and
the
so-
city owns property right there at that big overpass, so it's easy, they could easily put access in
Might be
there,
access
and that'd be
opportunity.
kind of the middle of the trail.
But those are sort of planning and design.
You
Fair
didn't mention any of these trails in southern Alabama.
So there are rail trails in southern Alabama. Most of them are in the Baldwin County area, kind of in the Mobile area. I just didn't put them up here because they're just not as easy
I
to access.
talked to
But
someone today in City Hall at Citronella and asked them how their trail was working out. And they said it was very seldom used anymore.
How long's it been open?
I don't know how long, it's quite some time because it does not go through residential areas, they told me.
yeah,
It goes as historical, it's through the center of town through a historical site. But she said that there were people that would order on it, but she said as far as using the trail, it was very seldom used. And that came from someone in City Hall. They do not have Chamber of Commerce anymore, pardon me.
I'm not putting the people down in Central now, I wouldn't walk on their trail down there.
No, it's not.
I mean, I don't mean that rude, but, that's just, you know, what I'm saying. No, you don't?
They tell you not to stop there.
Let me say this, Terry Acuff, our grant writer, says there's many of these trails up in Huntsville, the Huntsville area. And he was mentioning to me the property, talking about the property owners, that they didn't have any issues and he'll be here Thursday night and he can answer some of these questions about the trails they have up there.
yeah. And there are a few of them in Huntsville. I'm aware of one that's specifically a rail trail, but they do have, Huntsville has a fairly extensive greenways master plan that they're in the process of implementing. And a lot of their trails tend to follow drainages or along creeks and do run behind subdivisions and residential properties. And Huntsville is aggressively pursuing those projects. And now Madison County is getting on board. Madison County up to this point had not really thought about implementing much of their components of that plan in unincorporated areas. But I'm actually working with Madison County right now on an extension of one of their greenways along Indian Creek.
Right. Good to see you again. Not a question, a comment. Our family goes out to Western Washington quite often. And there's the Olympic Discovery Trail there, very long trail. The weekend activities are always tremendous. There's always runs, cycling. The real estate offices advertise boldly when they have property for sale that's on the trail. We have houses on the trail. It's a huge economic boon. The fact that it's such a long trail and has so few so few breaks in the trail. So it brings so much traffic from Seattle, from Oregon, from all over. It is the trail to hold these runs and cycling events on. I think this would be great for us. I wish it could be longer.
Larry Umber is with us tonight, born and raised in Fayette County, and has been in the real estate business for 20 years. He's a broker and appraiser with the Prater Company, and we'd like to give Larry an opportunity to speak to property values.
Well, I was asked to just come present some information, and I just, as an appraiser, I guess I always compare it to other trails and things, and like Brian commented, the only other one that's real close is Dora. So I called a couple of the realtors up there, and you can call and ask, all four real estate in Dora, James Ann Martin, and she's the broker and the owner, and Ginger Wise, and I just asked those the same questions, because you want to make sure you're doing a good thing, and they were very similar comments to what you had said. The houses that's on the, like Van, the houses that's on the trail, that's a real selling point. And she said, that there was. I asked him. I said, well, have there been any negative features or negative that you could say, because they indicated that they'd really been none. There was no more crime or no more trespassing or people in your backyard. But so anyway, then I went a little further and looked online, and I just got one copy, but I just Googled up advantages or disadvantages of rails to trails, and I've got about 27 here, and I kind of briefly read some of them, but most of them indicated that neighborhoods, they compared it to, there was one place here in Indianapolis that they compared it to almost as like being at the beach. It was obviously I'm not going to say your property's going to be $100,000. If it is, I'm going to buy some up before y'all get it. But they said that it was really a great thing, especially the benefits of health and just the increased awareness of walking and just the new generation is wanting to get out and do it. So that was very, they had just a lot of favorable things to say. And I noted no opposition. I really specifically looked, and in all the case studies, I had 27. The ones that I looked at, they were either just neutral or a slight increase. There was no negatives about any of it. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. But it looks like it would be a great project, and that helped our town.
Thank you, Larry. I have two announcements that I'd like to make. The first one, really Brian should make, but it's about the leadership workshop that he is conducting. And I think anybody who feels like they would like to be on the steering committee should attend this workshop. It's Saturday, May 14th in Tuscaloosa. Do you want to say anything about it?
Yeah, this is going to be an informal, fun workshop, but really we're going to highlight a lot of trail case studies, or a handful, I should say, of trail case studies from around Alabama. Alabama backcountry horsemen will be talking about some of their work with Alabama State Parks and developing equestrian trails. We've got the West Alabama Mountain Bike Association talking about their work with Park and Recreation Authority in Tuscaloosa and with state parks on mountain bike trail development. We've got, let's see, we'll be talking about Some other, we have trailers for trails, which there are 2 trailers in the state of Alabama that are available to communities to both build and maintain trails. Hand equipment, some power equipment, but basically available for a nominal rental fee. We'll be highlighting those, also talking about a new opportunity we've got for the Alabama Trails Commission through a grant that we received to train and begin using some equipment that will help trail operators assess their trails and develop a system of information for trail users excuse me, that will give trail users all the information they need to make a decision about whether or not I want to go down this trail. And it will help people with disabilities as well as people who aren't necessarily disabled. But it's called the Universal Trail Assessment Protocol. But then we're going to have field trips in the afternoon to go see the mountain bike trails in Monticello Park, the Riverwalk Trail in Tuscaloosa, which runs right along the Black River for many, many miles. And then also the hiking trails out at Hurricane Creek, and we'll have experts talking about how those projects were put together, how they were funded, the partners that were involved, how they're maintained, pretty much the X, Y, and Z and ABCs of trail projects.
Okay, I'm already registered for that, and Greg Hill is gonna go. If anybody else is interested, you can register on your own or can let me know. We could all go down together. The other thing that we would like to have in hand is some letters of support. We will have to have these for the grant application. I have guidelines with a sample letter. I don't know where they are. Maybe they're in my car. Tony went to my house to get them. But so if you want that, let me know. I'll get it to you. I'll run out to my car and see if they're there or email it to you. But I think the mayor would like to have them in hand by the 14th if you are so inclined. And Tony would like to say something.
I did not know until he was telling about the increase in property values, but I want you to know, those of you who live in the area closest, in town next to the, what will be the rails to trails, my first thought was, one wonderful thing about living where I live, and a lot of people don't know where I live, but I live over near the water tower. When my son was young, unlike his friends who all lived out on the highway, he could come the back way. He spent his life riding on Temple Avenue. If you are on the rails to trails next to it, your child gets on the rails and comes to town and go up and down on Saturday afternoon when there's no traffic. It's wonderful. And somebody said, well, if they put up a fence, we'll have a gate so that they can, that would be such a safe thing for them to be able to do. And also, it might encourage somebody to buy a house in that neighborhood if they thought their child, rather than having to go on Columbus Street, which is very, very dangerous.
Well, since you said that, I do have a quick question. I just didn't think of it until just now. We mentioned earlier something about this has nothing to do with rails to trails, about no sidewalk from Columbus Street. Could we not talk about that maybe in the future? Because I live right there and I would love to walk downtown.
Yeah,
and,
I always wanted to, there might be easement problems or something, I don't know, but yeah, certainly bring it up with the mayor or Dwayne or.
18 is a state highway, so we'd have to buy easement or city would.
I got you.
And, you know, we might get some TAP grants for that, but usually it's hard to get sidewalk grants these days. We did do some on the other side of town, and we have used them in the past, but nobody's really ever talked about on the street, so that's part of the thing.
Well, I live right there. It'd be perfect.
Any other questions? Brian, I can't thank you enough for coming from Birmingham to do this for us tonight, and I encourage, pardon me?
Thursday.
Thursday.
Let me announce again Thursday at 6 o'clock, and I want you to know the retired former mayor of Dora, that trail was built in 1999. Mayor Sides is coming down here to the meeting so that you can ask him questions about problems that they had and how they developed that trail. That's 3.2 miles.
Okay.
3.2 miles, the trail at Dora. And it links with the Summerton Trail. They finally come together, but now just a couple of years ago, Summerton got the grant money to build their trail. But Mayor Sides, who is a 5-term mayor, retired, owns a furniture store in Dora, has said that he would be glad to come down and just share how they started and any problems that came up, and you can ask him questions, and he said he'd be glad to do that, so.
And the same right in here?
Right here, yes, ma'am. It'll be at 6 o'clock. Thank all of you for coming to the meeting.
Sure.
How much was they asking for it, Mayor, again? They was asking
The
200?
quote that
Railroad
they,
agent, the railroad agent
Yes.
that we discussed
Right.
with.
Just.
375,000 for the 2.5 mile corridor, but
It's
he-
$2,500 per acre for
The rural part.
rural. But for the urban, what they call urban, it was $15,000 per acre.
Why can't we name it the Southern Railroad Trail and they donate it?
Yeah.
They used to do
Okay,
that.
Norfolk.
Once upon a time, back in the early days.
But when you get the MIA appraisal, you can negotiate. And that MIA means that they got a specialized, Brian, a person that just does that for a living.
what is it, what are the letters mean?
It's Appraisal Institute, what does the M stand for? I don't know. But it's.
We'd love for Larry to do
The,
this appraisal.
the federal,
No, you don't.
basically, in order to qualify for the federal funding, you have to follow the federal guidelines for right-of-way acquisition. And so that means basically your negotiations have to be based upon an appraisal that follows the federal guidelines. And so,
And if we could get some more comps, and Larry's been helping Brian with this, if we get some more comps, y'all can come up with a preliminary analysis of how much the value.
yeah, thumbnail estimate.
Yeah, I don't know, 15,000, any figure per acre in downtown Fayette, bring it now, but that's just what he came up with, But when you start negotiations, you always.
But that's what always happens, railroad company comes in high.
Yeah, they gotta start high.
Yeah, I know.
They're pretty proud.
We've got 3 or 4 Fayette County leadership class members here tonight, and I want to tell you how much I appreciate your interest in this, and thank you for coming. And it means a lot to see the leadership class showing leadership and being a part of the community. When we look at
That's
activities.
Danny and Zach, and who else?
Danny, Zach, and aren't you in the leadership class now? That's what I thought.
Oh, Elijah, yes,
Elijah,
of course, yeah.
Elijah. Colburn,
All right.
and I think that's it.
All right, well, thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you Thursday night, and